Good day, everybody. We're here to talk about what happens when you get that dreaded collection notice. Here at HealCredit, we tackle the tough topics, and today we're discussing what happens when you find yourself in collections. Hello? Hello, is this Lancelot Carlson? Who's calling? Hi, Mr. Carlson. I'm calling about your account that's been flagged for non-payment. Receiving a call like this can indeed be distressing. It's a wake-up call that something has gone awry with our financial management. When faced with a collections call, it's easy to want to hang up and forget it ever happened. But in the long run, this will just make the problem worse and worse. We must face these challenges head on. Now, take a deep breath. You're not alone. There's a clear path forward. We're going to break down the essentials of a credit report, examine the effects of collections on it, and outline your action plan to fix your credit score. Let's go. Today we're going to go over what your credit report is, how to get it, and what you need to look out for. Next, we're going to look at what it means for something to go to collections and why you're getting phone calls from a collection agency. Then, we're going to look at how this impacts your credit score and why that matters to you. Next, we're going to cover your action plan for dealing with your debt. And lastly, we're going to cover what you can do to never let this happen again. If you're impatient and you already know what your credit report is, where to find your delinquent accounts, and how it impacts your credit score, feel free to skip to the action plan section of this video. Alright, so you decided to stick around and hear me talk about credit reports.
I could talk all day about credit reports.
Your credit report is your financial report card. Your credit score is the grade that the credit reporting agencies give you. It's based on all this fancy math that is supposed to indicate how creditworthy you are. Banks, lenders, and even rental companies use this number to determine whether or not they should provide you with their service. So it's very important to keep your score as high as possible and your report as clean as possible. Now, if you don't pay a bill and it gets sent to a collection agency, that becomes a red flag on your credit report. It tells people you've had some trouble paying back what you owe, which can make it harder to borrow money, lease nicer cars, and/or homes. Managing any debts in collections is key. It's about showing that even if you slipped up, you're taking steps to fixing things. Paying them down helps rebuild trust that you are a borrower worth lending to. Understanding your credit report helps maintain this trust. In this video, we don't have time to cover how to retrieve and monitor your credit score. If you'd like help with that, feel free to check out this video here. Alright, so we've covered credit reports. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of collections. When a bill remains unpaid, the original company might seek help by involving a collection agency. They provide the agency with all the information about your past due balance, the date that the service was provided, and some information they may have had on file for you to identify who you are. Once contracted, the original company isn't supposed to handle your bill anymore, although they still do sometimes, and it's up to the collection agency to continue the collection process. Typically, a paper letter is then drafted by the collection agency and mailed to your home address with the details of your bill and ways to make a payment. Sometimes the process of collection also involves reaching out to your phone number on a regular basis. More modern agencies are starting to use electronic forms of communication like email and SMS. If you get a letter, you should open it and see if it has any settlement options included. We cover negotiating settlements a bit later in this video. A lot of the time, if your bill is not too old, you may be in a sweet spot where the collection agency hasn't had enough time to file your debt with the credit bureau. If this is the case, you should try to reach out to the collection agency as soon as possible and pay the bill so you can avoid getting a ding on your credit report. If you weren't fast enough, the collection agency may have already listed your debt, and it is unfortunately impacting your credit score negatively. Okay, so how do collections impact your credit score? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Collections are probably the worst things that can hit your credit report. Even a late payment is better because at least it's showing that you are making payments. The impact on your score can vary with how big the debt is, how many outstanding debts you have in collections, and previous credit history. That is why it is critical to pay down your collections quickly. Debts that are reported can take up to 7 years to roll off your credit report, and that clock doesn't start ticking until you have fully paid off your obligation. The good news is I have a plan for you to follow, so let's get started. Here's a high-level overview of the action plan we're going to cover. First things first, request debt validation. It's your right to ensure that the debt claimed is indeed yours and accurately listed. Once you've ensured that the debt is valid, let's move on to checking for errors. You'd be surprised how often inaccuracies appear on your credit reports. Now, if you found everything to be accurate, it might be time to negotiate. And yes, you can absolutely negotiate with collection agencies. In cases where negotiation isn't an option, or you prefer to just clear the slate, paying in full is your next step. If you don't have the money, you can ask for an installment plan. And after you've squared away your debts, you can request that your collection be removed or updated with the credit agencies. Let's dive into each step now. Let's dive into the first step of your action plan, debt validation. This is critical because sometimes debts are reported in error. When you get a collection notice, your gut reaction might be to panic or to immediately start paying it off. But hold on. If this isn't your debt, you have the right under the FDCPA law or Fair Debt Collection Practices Act to request validation. Write a letter to the collection agency asking for verification of the debt and send it via certified mail to ensure deliverability. You always want that letter to arrive quickly so the agency doesn't start pursuing you legally. Without valid proof, the collector must cease all collection activities. This includes removing your debt from your credit report. Now, let's turn detective and check for errors. Inaccuracies on your credit report can unjustly affect your credit score. You'd be surprised how often these reports can contain mistakes. The most important things to look for are incorrect dates or amounts owed. If something looks off, it's time to take action. Much of the same process applies to this step as the previous step around requesting validation. You will either send what is called a dispute letter via snail mail or email, or you can call the collection agency to let them know there was an issue. If you do call, they may ask you to send them an email or letter anyway, but they will give you specific instructions on how to do so to make it easier for them to process. When sending them your dispute letter, be sure to attach documentation such as the original bill to back up your claim that there were inaccuracies. Negotiation is an art, and it's easier to do when you are armed with the right information. I can't guarantee you'll get a discount because it's really up to the original creditor to set the terms of what the collection agency can do. Some debts have been purchased for pennies on the dollar. However, others are actually given a blanket statement authority by their creditors to give you a certain percent off if you pay today. They're eager to make a deal, so you often have more leverage than you think. Before you make that call, know what you can afford to pay, whether it's a lump sum or a payment plan. Have a clear number in mind. There is a little known secret that it is very typical for a creditor to have a minimum settlement authority of about 15%. So in other words, if you ask a collection agency for a 15% discount to pay today, you have a good chance that you'll get it. I'm not entirely sure how this will impact your credit score. The only ones that truly know how credit scores are calculated are those genius statisticians that work for the credit bureaus. The agency may report that you only made a partial payment. That will not look as great on your report as making a full payment. Just keep this in mind when you're deciding to settle instead of paying in full. Also, make sure to have your payment information ready so you're not having to search for it while you're on the phone. Typically, agencies will accept both credit card and ACH payments. If you decide to pay with ACH, make sure you have your bank information handy and also be aware that it takes 3 to 5 business days for your payment to actually clear. So you'll have to wait longer for the agency to update their records. Credit card is basically instant. Lastly, remember to get a receipt from the agency once you've made the payment for your records. After verifying that you owe this debt and that everything looks accurate, you may decide to pay in full. This is the easiest route when dealing with a collection agency, and they may even have ways you can do this online without having to talk to anyone over the phone. If you can't pay the full amount, you should ask for a payment plan. Agencies will normally allow you to spread your payments over 12, 18, or 24 months without much fuss, depending on how large your balance is and your financial situation. If you need more time than that, they will usually try to work with you to figure out what you can afford. As usual, keep documentation on everything. If you make a full payment, you're going to want the receipt for that so you can ask the collection agency to update your credit report with the credit bureaus. If you're on a payment plan, it is critical for you to keep the receipt for every single payment you make so you don't overpay accidentally. It is in the best interest for the agency also to get this right due to consumer protection laws, but it's always a good idea to have records for yourself. Congrats on dealing with your debt! Now it's time to talk about cleaning up your credit report. Whether you've paid in full or through a settlement, you have the right to request that the collection agency remove the entry from your credit report. This is known as a goodwill deletion. It's important to understand that collection agencies are under no obligation to remove legitimate debts from your credit report. However, they may do so out of goodwill, especially if you've paid the debt in full. To do this, you'll need to write a goodwill letter. In the letter, explain your financial situation, what led to the debt going to collections, and how you've resolved it. Then politely ask if they would consider removing the entry from your credit report as a gesture of goodwill. They may even agree to this over the phone as you're making the payment. Remember, there's no guarantee they'll say yes, but if you don't ask, you'll never know. It's worth a try, especially if it can give your credit score a significant boost. After payment, monitor your credit report to see if the collection account was removed from your credit report. Even if the account is marked as paid and not completely removed from your credit report, it will have a very positive impact on your credit score compared to having outstanding, unpaid collection accounts. To recap, here is the action plan. Request validation for your debt if you don't think you owe this bill. Check for errors if you believe you owe the bill, but there are inaccuracies. If you do owe the bill, decide whether or not you want to negotiate a settlement or pay in full or opt for an installment plan. And finally, request deletion of your collection account from your credit report. Our goal at HealCredit is to improve your credit score so you can have the brightest financial future for years to come. It can take a while to bring your score into the 700s once you've had blemishes on your report, but the steps are not difficult. Just remember to proactively check your credit report regularly and make payments on time to all of your billers. Handle any past due balances before they go to collections, and ideally faster than that so you don't get any late fees. If you liked this video, please subscribe and press the like button. If you want to learn more about how to improve your credit score, check out the next video where I break down 5 tips to increase your credit score in just 3 months.